I try to ignore the sudden migraines. Since meeting her, I hadn't been able to think straight. I followed her, I remind myself. I haven't been acting myself lately. For our sake, I'll stay away, I decide. I sit down, suddenly unable to remember how I had come to walk along a gravel road. A man in dark clothing slowly pulls up toward the abandoned warehouse, careful not to make too much noise on the gravel road or create any noticeable clouds of dust. Without cutting the engine, he steps out of the car and closes the door behind him. How did I get here? I only started walking just an hour ago at noon. I check my watch. It's dark out. Sunset is nearly over, but I can still see my breath. Slipping on my jacket, I hear muffled noises and notice the distinct rumble of a car's engine. Too blind to pinpoint where the noise could be coming from, I follow the sound until I begin to make out the shape of a car. I left my phone in the car this morning, I remember, angry at myself. In the distance, an ambulance siren wails. The muffled noises then return, this time more clearly coming from the car. Afraid, I silently make my way over to the trunk, assuming the person is inside. I find and then lift the handle. There's no click. I decide the trunk is locked. Beginning at my temples, a migraine makes its way around my head. I quickly hide. The man places his phone on the dashboard. He had set an alarm that would warn him of how much time he had left. The man then walks over to the trunk and opens it. The bag stops squirming. He barely lifts the bag when it jerks out of his arms. Knowing better, he resists the fight. He makes his way over to the warehouse and kicks the door in, placing the bag against the wall. He lights a single candle set on a stool. The man then leaves, checking for any wanderers. I stood up sure the man had gone. Already an hour had passed. What can I do? I shouldn't even be here, I thought, already leaning towards the direction I'd run. Then again, there's no one else here. Anything can happen. I crouch in my hiding spot, waiting to see if the man would return. I'm wasting time, I decide. Without thinking, I sprint for the warehouse door. After catching my breath, I slowly peek through the door and walk in. It's pitch black. Standing frozen in shock, I realize no one's there. The only sound comes from a bag I spot against a wall, only a few feet away from me. Instinct tells me, open the bag. I don't believe it. It's her. Who would have done this? Immediately I try to free her, but with just a candle as my guiding light, it was nearly impossible. I stopped tying and checked her for any bruising. There were plenty. She began to moan. Shh, I'm here to help. She froze and raised her head. Her eyes widened, maybe glad someone had finally come. Though her mouth was tied also, she managed to bite me and began to thrash. Why? The man emerges from the dark. He pulls the cloth from her mouth and leaves, returning with a bread basket. He holds bread up to her mouth, then water. She refuses both. He shakes her violently and then begins to pull out something short and gleaming. She managed to thrash enough to spill the liquid onto his clothes. Stop it, I shout before I could stop myself. He doesn't reply immediately. Stay away, I'm protecting her, he managed to say at a severe whisper. Before I could see him, I felt something hard come at my head. Now I was afraid. You're mad, I said unsurely. It was too late to run. I couldn't see him. How long have you been following her? He said. He knew. I feel something brush against my neck. I throw myself at the man. Nothing. Where is he? I asked her urgently. She said nothing. Panicking, she pointed behind me. Blind, I turned and punched the air. I soon made contact with something I keep at it blindly. She continued to point behind me. Another migraine. My phone ringing, I thought, standing up. The car's dashboard began to vibrate. I noticed she had managed to back away. I opened my hand to find breadcrumbs and a crowbar. I reached into my pocket for my phone and felt that a cool liquid had soaked my dark clothing. In my pocket, my fingers hit something smooth. A click. I jump when the car doors unlock. I look more closely at the car, then at my keys. I throw them for no particular reason, angry. It wasn't until she managed to set herself free and pull out her phone, already dialing 911, that I had completely understood. I never saw the man, I realized. The police gave her directions. She found a decent weapon and held it out, slowly backing away from the scene. She managed to lock herself into my car, keeping all people out. There were never any more than 2 people in the warehouse. Never another man. The police sirens could be heard in the distance. The police surrounded the building, the lights flashing, guns pointed
her pointing at me. On the ground, someone shouted through a megaphone. Me! All the way down! Now! They shouted. Me!
Are you still have more